The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, everybody. This is Krishna Vidula from IUCE. All of you know that. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are, different parts of the world. It's my pleasure to introduce to you the person who's going to conduct this session. It's Ishwar Puri, a good friend of mine. He's from Canada, Dean of Engineering at McMaster University, and most everybody knows McMaster. And it's the place where project-based learning and all the great things about engineering and engineering education originated. And he's very, very active in the Global Engineering Deans Council. And he's brought with him a lot of his friends to have a conversation with us as part of the Global Industry Forum Dynamic Dialogue webinar. Okay, it's about corporate learning, alternative and complementary certification. This is something that's I think everybody's interested in nowadays. So without much ado, here goes Ishwar, and I will make you the you can speak, and I think Michael O'Neill becomes the presenter, right?
Yes, that's right. Thank you very much, Krishna. And again, welcome to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, as Krishna said. Welcome to the first in the series of dynamic dialogue sessions. These sessions originate from the GEDC Industry Forum, and I had the pleasure to host that forum online this year in partnership with Petrus and the GEDC. The Industry Forum, as some of you might know, is a very interactive event which brings together education and industry leaders from our community, the engineering community, and beyond. And we listen to each other's needs, exchange good practices, share good ideas. But most of all, we are inspired by each other and we build a strong sense of community. A key feature of the Industry Forum involves the dynamic design groups, which engage all the event participants in discussion on critical topics. And the participants actually design solutions. So the feedback that we received this year from participants after the event demonstrated a strong interest in exploring those themes further. The participants wanted to continue the dialogue, and that is the premise of our webinar today. Today, we're going to focus on corporate learning, alternative and complementary certification. And we are joined by world-class panelists who were present at the event in October, and some who we've invited after the event. I'm particularly really happy that Kristen at Petrus asked me to host this dialogue. Kristen and I have had a wonderful relationship in developing events and in developing dialogues. So this is an opportunity for me, not just to continue my role as host from the event earlier this year, which he very kindly said I executed with panache, but because the theme is one that I'm particularly engaged in. So think about credentials, micro-credentials, corporate learning, alternative certification. There are several very fundamental issues that we need to consider. What platforms are we going to offer these credentials on? How will these credentials be presented to employers or shared otherwise? How do we have a standardized concept of skills and competencies? Who owns the credentials? So if I have a credential that I've mastered a skill or a competency, do I own it? Or does somebody else own it? So that every time I have to access that credential or present it to an employer, I have to actually pay someone. So these are very philosophical questions. Will my privacy be maintained? These are the sorts of questions that I think our community is grappling with. So you can see there's really a lot we can discuss together. So before we turn to our panel, we're going to kick off with a company that is today at the heart of bringing education in new and engaging ways to learners of all kinds. And of course, that is Coursera. I'm delighted to welcome Michael O'Neill, who is Director of University Partnerships in the Europe, Middle East, and Africa at Coursera. And after Michael, you'll hear the panelists, all of them good friends, But first, Michael, over to you.
Thank you so much. So I'll share my screen. And are you seeing the presentation? Can you just confirm that the slides are showing up?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Fantastic. Hi, my name is Michael O'Neill. I'm here to discuss the workplace of the future and how we're building the seeds needed for success. So within Coursera, we basically have three different areas I'm going to focus on within this. One is our Global Skills Index. What are the skills that students need? And that's driven by our yearly report that allows us to share with you from over 3,200 businesses what the top skills are being used across different sectors, from engineering, data science, operations, by employers to reskill and upskill their workforce. The other is, what are the academic programs that you're offering and those that we can support with our university partners to address those requirements and the skills that would be relevant to each one of those courses, both knowledge, skills, and then actual virtualized labs, which I'll go into detail to discuss. And the last is, how do you track and measure your students and their skills development? We talked, was brought up here quickly about certificates, and partner certificates is one of the key elements that Coursera works within. So when you're building the skills needed for today versus tomorrow's workplace, we've done a lot of research working with ourselves, and over the last 4 years, over 200 million learners that have used the platform to either reskill and upskill themselves through Coursera for Business, or working in universities with their Coursera for Campus, the Coursera for Students, to be able to engage in our content. So one of those stats that are on the left, the 42% of jobs are expected to have an entirely different skill set by 2022. Now that's driven by two areas. One is that we know from the advancements that are happening across all three major cloud manufacturers, whether it's Google, Amazon, or Microsoft Azure, that there's a number of uses of machine learning and AI that are in the prototype stage, the concept and theory stage. Over 85% of a $13 trillion market is currently in proof of concept that's looking to come to fruition and become in production between 2022 and 2024. The average self-life of 2 years once a student graduates of their skills working in universities is represented by what we're seeing both in the survey data that happens after people are taking our courses, and then working with workforce recovery initiatives across each of the governments in the world, as well as over 300 governments and municipalities, whether that's Egypt or whether that's working with New York State, to be able to provide a reskilling and upskilling of their workforce. And then the other elements is that although there is fear about automation taking control, it's still going to be skills that are employability skills working together that will make it so that jobs are available across the sector. And I'll have some data slides on that as well. Very quickly, what the Coursera platform avails is it's made up of three components. One we call learners, students. These are 73 million active learners on the platform studying across business, engineering, data science, and other disciplines. We provide content that's from 165 university partners, and then the leaders in industry that are bringing to market technologies that have not yet hit the mainstream for teaching, but are actually cutting edge in digital transformation and innovation. So certificate courses from IBM, from AWS, from Facebook, from Salesforce, from Intuit, gateway certificates that are professional certificates that the student or learner owns that goes with them throughout their career. For every single course that is taken, it is Coursera's approach that is a certificate issued by the university partner or industry partner that is owned by the student and the learner. And it will go with them so they can share that, whether it's on LinkedIn or if it's inside of their own CV. There's also Coursera for Campus, which is what I represent in EMEA. Coursera for Campus is the access for a university to augment their catalog with our catalog of courses from university industry partners. It's also the ability to private author, which I'm going to talk about, how you can be able to deliver private proctored exams by your university or Coursera Labs or guided projects to be able to track and certify the skills that are being learned through each one of these programs. Now, one of the background elements that were seen by our data, but also represented by both McKinsey as well as Gartner and also by IBM Research, looking at the top 2,000 and 3,000 businesses that are employing by those two other companies, but also by ourselves by looking at the over 70 million a year Coursera for business users. These are the technology, business, and data requirements, the skills being looked at between 2019 and 2020. So we separate the unemployed from our government initiatives for the workforce recovery, and then the employed are those currently in business. As you're seeing, skills in tech and business are quite important, but soft skills, how we work as collaboration, how we deal with team, how we deal with management, how we deal with critical thinking, those are at the top level in terms of what's being looked at in these COVID times that we have. In high level, some of the jobs that are available coming in between now and 2023 are broken down by the different sectors that are inside of engineering and data science, but that is dwarfed by the human skills that are still going to be required as machine learning is placed in time, with critical thinking and empathy and agile leadership and resilience for a success in employability. When we talk about Coursera, we look at various elements of courses that would build skills for your corporate engineering or for your disciplines and faculty for engineering, business, or tech. And those comprise a couple of different ways of us working with a higher education institution. When we work for Coursera for Campus, what it's broken down by is access to a catalog of over 5,200 courses, over 900 hands-on guided projects, and private authoring of your own content, your own project exams to deliver that as well. There's also hands-on learning and job-ready skills that are broken down into each one of those. And as a scalable platform, we're built on an infrastructure that grew from 45 million to 75 million, literally in 4 months over the last period. When we work with a dean, with the head of a school, with a rector or vice rector, we have a team that supports the pedagogy and support across each of the domains. So core engineering courses from civil to aeronautical to mechanical to electrical, to emerging heavy digital, heavy data science, as well as digital transformation like robotics or digital manufacturing, working with Autodesk, working with NVIDIA, working with Unity to be able to create VR, AR, and areas both on manufacturing as well as cloud computing. We also roll out inside of our administration the ability for different types of academies. Academies are broken down horizontally by the type of level of the student or learner working, as well as specific functions or areas of focus, whether that's working with agile, whether that's working with machine learning, whether that's data science working inside of the R applications for public health, or they're working for operations inside of a financial institution, dealing with blockchain and fintech. And then it's specifically towards different types of roles and different types of engineering and developer requirements. So private authoring is part of our Coursera offering. Private authoring allows you to have basically question banks or your own content that you can create to address using Coursera either for your own curriculum or also for being able to wrap around our courses as if they were a textbook and be able to deliver your own localized exams. Guided projects, this is based and authored on rhyme.com. On the right-hand side, you have the speaker, the student, the lecturer, and then student will go on the left-hand side, see what's happening hands-on inside the same virtual machine, whether that's Windows, Linux, or web tools, and then be able to follow along step by step with the process and the progress that's being given, and at the end, take a quiz to track their assessment. Now, Coursera Labs has taken quite an advancement, and it's very specific to this market space. Our partners are basically have access to a number of different pre-built images that are part of Coursera Labs in existing courses that are already on the catalog for each one of those sectors. What we have integration with is we look at active learning, engaging with either a technical assessment, a team review, a staff review, or a peer review if you're dealing with master's or PhD students, or also working at undergraduate level. There's mentors and there's discussion support within each of the curriculum courses so that students can be helped through both technical as well as theoretical questions that they might need to feed. To streamline the authoring process, we've done base images for both Jupyter notebooks, integrating with NB Grader for automatic grading assignments, working across data science and base load of the tools that we required for that. TensorFlow, if you're going to be doing Kubernetes, going into an a Google Cloud platform, or DeepMind type medical image type process, or we're dealing with SciPy and different types of coding. When dealing with public health and bioinformatics and engineering around data science tied to health, or any statistical elements, there's RStudio and a baseline image for that. There's also Visual Code Studio. That Visual Studio Code enables you to test and train and assess on C, C#, Ruby, Python, or any of the other languages that you might want to work with. There's also the ability to develop with any plugin or LTI supported technology. The Sleuth app is an example of a model using JavaScript, or you can do full stack development. So if you're teaching how to deal SQL, you can have the database as well as the coding for being able to have the full environment available in a simple access in the web built in as part of our deal. So Coursera labs are powered by Docker. They're empowered to be able to support across these sectors different types of elements. And I think it's now time for us to take into further conversation how the panel would like to see those elements work. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Michael. So before we go to the panel, I have some questions for you. So
Yes.
Kirsten knows me, and they're not going to be softball questions. So the first question I have for you is about quality assurance. When we put academic programs together, they're put together under a strict regimen of quality assurance. What you're doing is you're picking and choosing from courses from a multitude of institutions, and you make a package. However, when academics make programs, they think about intended learning outcomes, they stack up those intended learning outcomes, and then they work towards giving students some graduate attributes. Is this just a business opportunity for you, or do you think about this on a more pedagogical or profound educational level?
So on 2 points to that, our mission is that we believe high quality education and access to that is paramount. Our founders basically were leaders in their fields at Stanford University in machine learning and AI. Their pedagogy and our approach is all based on the mastery and learning objectives of mastery of skills and outcomes. So within each course, we basically focus on what is the skill, what is the mastery that's going to happen, and then in a way reverse engineer. What are the lectures, the labs, or the reading materials that will further towards that goal? When we select our university partners, there is a strict and high quality level for a partner to become one of our content creators. So initially it started with Stanford University, Princeton, University of Pennsylvania, and University of Michigan, all high pedigree. But we only allow either the number 1 in a country or the top 200 of universities to be our partners. They are the ones that certify based on their own rigor, their own experience, what courses are going to be given a certificate of completion from that university, delivered through the Coursera platform for the student that completes that. For our industry partners, again, we have a very high selective element that is tied to expertise for best practices in business or technology. So working with IBM or Google, for example, has over 109 different courses. They have a number of gateway certificates by architecture, how to deal with machine learning, how they can be, IBM deals with natural language processing, dealing with data science. Those certifications come from the industry based on expertise of a professional certificate that's required and works in industry as a calling card of, I have reached this level of expertise. As said, I can be now working as Google IT support. I can now be working as an architect for IBM or Amazon. And Azure will be doing the same later on down. Now, that's pedigree-wise, pedagogy, yes, there's a process. The ownership of the certificate goes with the student or the worker as they move through the organization within it. Does that address what you're asking?
Yes, so let's flesh this a little further. You mentioned pedigree, you mentioned names like Stanford, Princeton, Michigan, and so on. So I have two comments. The first thing is that all the industrial organizations and universities you mentioned are US based. So there are two parts to my question. The first question is, so you have a US centric approach. Why
No,
should
we
someone in Canada, why, hang on. I'm the moderator, right? So the first question is, why should somebody in Canada or South Africa, is this a hegemonic approach or is this a global approach? The second question is that you mentioned IBM, you mentioned Google, and so on. So the analogy I give is that perhaps I put together a program, to make an automobile, saying I have Tesla represented and GM represented and so on. But does that really give confidence to the consumer that I'm going to have a high-class automobile? It's the probability that I'll have the high-class automobile, right? So tell us about the rigorous quality standards you have to develop your credentials. And the second is, this is a global audience. Is this a US-centric approach or is this a global approach?
It's 100% a global approach, working across each continent as well. We have over 28 European-based content providers, university partners that work with us. When we work with for example, you mentioned South Africa. If you were going to be looking at fintech or blockchain and how data science would apply to that, we would actually have you look at the University of Cape Town specialization on developing a business and working with data science. If you were looking at, for example, Leiden University, which is out of the Netherlands, purely creating genius, that's their focus. They are one of our partners for generating different content. When you look at R and the R tracking that's happening with COVID track and trace, one of the most positive, or often we had over 900,000 people subscribe to that course since March, both from all government initiatives, led often by, there's Johns Hopkins, but there's also Imperial College of London is delivering their program. I should point this out. There's Coursera for Campus, which is a catalog of courses, but we have over 24 graduate level programs, degree programs that are the same as going to Imperial College of London. And specifically for that one, I worked at the digital exemplars with Imperial Clinical Data Science out of Harvard and University of Edinburgh prior to coming over to Coursera. And Ben Glocker's courses at Imperial were groundbreaking in terms of precision medicine and machine learning for biomarker detection inside of radiology imagery. And those courses led into, in that specific instance, getting their students employed with DeepMind at Google Cloud, which they had built 12,000 jobs inside of behind King's Cross inside of London. Those courses are part of a master's program that is a full master's program, as if you went to Imperial to take that course that's offered through our platform for a degree, for a master's degree. But then aspects of those are also made available to the catalog, so they're able to be used by the wider Coursera for Campus users. So pedagogy, definitely we're looking across, the rigor is coming from our selection of universities. We're expanding right now into the Middle East as well as into Africa, so there's not a bias of the global north. And to address that specific issue, we brought in guided projects, not at a university focus, but at a lecturer faculty level, so that voices across every continent, led by a community of top leaders in their respective fields, could create hands-on practical guided projects where we've got, for example, Serco and United Kenya Methodist inside of in Kenya. Each one of those universities has had lecturers produce over 4 guided projects on Java, on machine learning. So it's across, as well as we've got content created in India, content created across every one of the continents. Where we're lacking and we're building up is Africa. So working with Africa universities to create their own content with their own stories and their own approach. And that's one of our areas of focus. So our focus is not US, it's global. We've got teams in each region, and it's really to source content that's from each one of those continents, as well as experts across each one of those.
Thank you. No, that's a very fulsome answer, Michael, and a convincing one. One very quick question before I go to the panel, because they are just straining to also jump in. I can see that from their expressions on their faces because they have a lot to say. You mentioned many Anglophone universities. We went from North America and then we jumped to Imperial College. So is the Coursera program an Anglophone program? Is it not relevant to Latin America and other parts of the world where the medium of instruction might not be English?
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you for that setup. So no, there's also there's universities that speak French that are in France, for example. HEX has their master's in entrepreneurialism. One of the universities I'm working with is in Mozambique. There's a whole Latin America has been huge for us. Portuguese, we have both core languages, and then for all of the lectures, there's also inside of our assets, there's transcription, there's a video asset, there's reading. For let's say I took Portuguese as an example, there's over 3,200 of our courses that have already been transcribed with the video of the lectures into subtitled for Portuguese, working with German, working with Italian, working with French. We're dealing with the Arabic and supporting the Arabic languages as they go across. We're actively working with 2 potential university partners in that region to develop content that's specific to the Middle East and to the Arabic world. And we are seeing that it is expanding out. So we bring on average 70 to 90 additional courses per month. And the growth is very heavily focused on, right now, it's definitely Africa and the Middle East, but Latin America and Spanish and other Spanish, Portuguese, predominantly in those in South America, subtitled, some native courses, and the tech courses are all basically, your language in Python is Python regardless of how you're learning it. So some of those become easier.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks for a fulsome discussion. You know what? I'll buy you a beer someday. And
I'd love it.
So let's go to Jennifer. I'll buy you a beer too, Jennifer. But before that, you've got to say something of value. 5 minutes of value here. You have to unmute yourself. It's the microphone icon.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I couldn't tell where I was muted from. I also couldn't hear you for a second. Can you repeat the question?
Just your thoughts about the subject matter, and if you had some thoughts about the discussion, just a free-flowing discussion. So over to you.
I'm very excited by what Coursera is doing, what Michael's been talking about. At Siemens, we find ourselves kind of uniquely positioned in this place between our industry customers and our academic partners, especially in the global academic program that I represent. And one of the things that we're really looking at is how that education landscape is really changing and how we can meet learners where they are on their journey, because I think that we're seeing a real watershed in how it is that people learn and when they learn, where they learn. So whereas obviously Michael's representing the university programs, but I think we're seeing perhaps a little bit of a change in exactly who our key learner is when we think about university learners. So so one of the things that we have definitely noticed is an uptick in independent learners seeking information. For example, we have student downloads that learners can use outside of university licenses to put our software on their own machines and then pursue information about that. So we are actually pursuing a MOOC strategy. I'm very excited. We'll actually have a couple of courses popping up on Coursera through University of Michigan partner program to really kind of cast a bit of a wider net and see where people are. And I'm very excited about some of the things that Boeing is doing as well. I was excited to have this opportunity to talk with Michael about that as well, because there's just a lot of great things happening in industry that really, I think, support and expand on what has traditionally been the purview of the university.
Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer. Michael, that's Michael F. Michael Fors. Your thoughts, and you're not shy.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Thank you for having me here, and Jennifer, glad to be here to talk with you, Siemens as well. Yeah, and Michael, thanks for the presentation on Coursera. I thought it was very good. Yeah, I'll just be a little bit compelling and say the way corporate universities have tried to educate people within the private sector is changing, and I'll even be a heretic and say that the way we've done it in the past, which is more open enrollment courses within a company, is dead or dying. It's got to be much more focused, and that's where the university comes into play, or third parties like Coursera or Degree.com or edX. That's where I think you start to see this huge change, the sea change that's happening, and COVID just has accelerated it. And so, you know, when we think about educating people now, I mean, first of all, we look across the life cycle. So K through 12 STEM education, getting involved with universities, involvement with GEDC to talk about engineering and how that's done and how it's evolving, but even all the way through into how we develop our people. And even after they retire, bringing them back as gig workers is part of it all. So we're really looking from kindergarten through retirement at development of a pipeline for employment. But when we do go to develop people, we really have to look at the business strategy and sit down with leaders. And then assessments of skills, you know, I once heard that roles and skills are the new currency of development. And so how do we develop roles and skills based on data? So looking at assessments, aggregating data by role, and seeing where we are with a given role within the company. If it's a really critical role, say systems engineer, software engineer, we really start to look at where we're strong or weak. How do we build on the strengths? How do we fill gaps where we have weaknesses? And then how do we upskill? And it's very targeted upskilling. And the challenge here is there's very little time to take training and very little dollars to pay for the training. And so how do you create mini learning pathways that are curated, because we can't own all the content. The days of owning 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 courses are pretty dead. So how do we curate? How do we go to someone like a Coursera or a Degree.com or an edX and pull valid university courses or third-party courses like from Pluralsight that we know have merit, have substance, have validity, and pull them in to create mini learning pathways to do very targeted upskilling. And in that way, then we end up showing proof of proficiency on the job for individuals. So we really want to see that they can do something afterwards, to Michael and Neil's point about Coursera. And once there's that proof of proficiency, then how do we give a credential? Because people want badges, they want CEU credits, they want university credit, not just some kind of credit within a learning management system within a company. So that's really our approach, is really be very laser focused, very targeted when we go after things. Now, from a university perspective, that opens up opportunities because we need curated content. And so it's how do we get the partnership with a university, and we've worked with MIT and Georgia Tech and Stanford and others, and then globally as well. To your point, Ishwar, we've worked globally around the world with different universities. In India, in China, in Europe, and Latin America, and how do we pull forward the best universities for the region and in given languages to help with these more curated mini learning pathways? Because the wave of the future, as I see it, is stackable credentials, and as you've all been talking as deans, these stackable credentials can become as important as the four-year degree. I think the four-year degree or the master's or PhD degree still adds a lot of value, but it has a shelf life, I think, as Michael mentioned. And so how do you then go beyond that? Because there's a whole lifetime of development that's needed, and we need to develop people for our business, and they want to know how to develop themselves for our business, but also balance that with their role in career development as well. So help them develop their role in career along the way equally. And so that's the approach as we're thinking about it.
Thanks, Michael. I have some thoughts, and I'll pose some questions to Jennifer and you about partnerships with universities. So think about this while Sunil is presenting his thoughts. I find that corporations are very realistic about their bottom line and about dollars and cents, but very unrealistic about, they can be very unrealistic about universities. They sometimes imagine universities to be bottomless pits of resources and funding, and they want services on the cheap. So think about how you would construct a business model for partnerships with universities that accurately are able to recompense the universities for costs of these partnerships. So I'll leave it there. But Sunil, over to you.
Thanks, Ishwar, and of course, thank you, colleagues, for the very inspiring discussions and the energy that's there. I think first and foremost, I think, in my view, coming from a university sector, the idea of complementary certification for us is not a new thing. It has been around for a while. Maybe now with 4IR and different texts becoming more and more to the fore, I think we're giving it more impetus or more visibility. So certainly, for example, when we started our computer engineering program in around 1998, I mean, at that time, we already started working with, for example, Cisco, where our students, besides doing their computer engineering degree, were doing these courses and getting certification as an add-on to the degree. So I think that's important. I think the other thing for me is that reflecting on this, coming from academia, I think, university is not transactional. I think we are there to create and to give fundamental knowledge. And I think that's always the case. And I think that's always going to be the case. And of course, I think we must differentiate between skills and education. I think we give education and some skills, and part of the education we give is how to learn and unlearn and relearn, as Alvin Toffler says. And that's important. But I think sometimes industry may give you some skills that's going to help you at that point in time. And as you said, industry sometimes they give you certain skills because I think they need those skills at that particular work environment at that point in time. And they're obviously going to reinvent themselves going forward. But the fundamental knowledge we give at universities, I think that's always going to be the salient, the backbone, the foundation, I think, of anything one learns to go forward in terms of the core knowledge we give. I think also where sometimes now we've got different industries, and as you said, each industry sees their own importance in their own courses, and sometimes it becomes a whole plethora of courses out there. When you take a simple course like deep learning or AI, and how many of them are out there already? Aren't we confusing the consumer or the student or the learner out there in the broader public? And I think these are things how we can consolidate and rationalize. I understand competition is good, but I think competition to certain levels, there should be a certain threshold for competition. But at the same time, we're duplicating resources, and can't we consolidate some of that? Because I mean, the world has so many challenges. And if you look at the Gini index between the have and the have-nots, is radical. And I think COVID has shown us that to even greater extent. And Ishwar, I'll leave it there for now, and we can chat later.
Well, thank you very much. You're all very brief and to the point, and so we are staying on time. We're going to go on to questions from the audience, but while they're formulating their questions and feeding them to me. So Michael, Jennifer, any idea about how you develop realistic business models? I mean, do you have realistic conceptions about the resources that universities have? And while you're thinking about an answer to this, I have another question to the entire panel. What we've heard is name dropping about brand name universities like Michigan and Stanford and so on. And Sunil, you know, the GEDC involves hundreds of deans from around the world. The webinar is being recorded. And should they read the recording, should they simply check out thinking there's no role for me, I need to go form another consortium? So think about that question as well. Moving beyond the brand name, how do we have a more inclusive discussion rather than the name dropping or brand name discussion? Michael, Jennifer, any thoughts about business models?
Jennifer, do you want to go first?
No, you go right ahead.
Well, I think, you know, Michael O'Neill, you were right, I think, in saying that the world is speeding up, and part of it's due to these cloud technologies, AI, machine learning, quantum computing. So on the business side, we feel this need to upskill our people more frequently than ever, yet we have to be able to create partnerships where universities are comfortable with the pace and get compensation for their involvement. And so it has to be some, I think, a little bit more enduring partnership. And global, you know, because most companies, or a lot of big companies, work globally, and so local connections to universities in South Africa, for example, in Pretoria, or other places in Africa or the Middle East or Asia need to be, I think, nurtured, because it shouldn't just be some kind of brand signature universities, to your point, Ishwar. I do think, you know, that we also have a social responsibility as companies and universities to look at where we are in the state of the world. You know, Michael mentioned the World Economic Forum data. They're also very much looking at reskilling 1 billion people by 2030. We're involved in that effort because it's really the accelerated technologies, but of course COVID is pushing it further and further. Even an organization nationally like Rework America for the US is trying to take care of reskilling 40 million COVID unemployed. So there's a huge need. Boeing just invested $4.5 million over 3 years with Syracuse University to reskill veterans of military. And so there are these efforts, and you know, some of those are US examples, but I think they play out globally. How do we form partnerships to be socially responsible, as well as how do we create partnerships that may be needs of a company, but need to also balance the partnership with universities on their time cycle and their need to create valid quality content that's certified, and for universities to get compensated for their efforts fairly. So there's some magic there that I don't think anyone's really hit upon yet, but there's a formula for success and maybe a playbook in there that's needed.
Thanks, Michael. I knew there was a reason why I enjoyed your company at the industry forum that we had. Very good. So to all of you, and maybe Michael O, you could start the discussion. There's a question from the audience, and I'll go to that next.
Ishwar, may I suggest
yes, Krishna.
We could unmute people if they wanted to talk. I think there's Peter. Peter wanted to ask a question, and it's very easy to unmute people who want to comment personally, but that might help. That's up to you as a moderator to decide. But we have
right.
Patrick wanted to say something.
I don't have that ability. I don't.
I can do it. I can do it. I can do it.
Okay. So maybe I'll ask this. Maybe I'll ask this this question, and then there is another question regarding labs. What solutions do we have about virtualizing labs? After we do that, Krishna, if you could just unmute folks, and then they could. Okay. So so let's take these two questions, and then we can go to the unmuting. So the first question is, how do we move to the inclusive discussion, you know, beyond the brand name university approach? Because there are going to be hundreds of individuals from universities that might not be considered brand names, but they may feel that they offer a quality education. How do they become part of the conversation?
I can actively address that in 3 different regions. So inside of Romania, for example, inside of Kenya, inside of Mozambique, as 3 examples. In each one of those situations, they're not necessarily going to be a university partner, but Coursera enables the private authoring, the same tools that are used by our university industry partners, for them to be able to develop and access and create their own content and deliver that on a global scale. So for example, Babes Boyle University, which is inside of Romania, working with their mathematics and computer science department, taking parts of our catalog, but also knowing that they want to reach out into their surrounding regions, into the Slovakias and into the other areas, to offer out their undergraduate and graduate program distance by offering their own content and then enrolling those students into the courses. Like, an interesting aspect is also, one of the things I wanted to bring up was, leading towards your conversation about labs, virtual labs became an actual selling point for which I wasn't aware of when I was dealing with the African Nazarene University in Kenya. They accredited in Kenya the BSc in computing back in 2017. The advancements on Internet of Things, machine learning for AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform moved way ahead since 2017 till now, just in the dynamics of the industry and the capitalism of those three major players behind each one of their platforms. So what we were able to provide with the licenses to Coursera was actually a cost-cutting effort, but also a way for their own, they could create with our virtualized labs using our infrastructure scalable just through that private authoring license, so they could deliver their own content and their own labs to their market, to their existing market in Kenya and on a global space. The other element I wanted to bring out about this is that things are still at proof of concept. There's a lot of areas, especially in Africa, we're working with the different leaders, both at the government level and as well as the university level and the ministry level, to build the business of Africa. There is over 4.5 million students that have taken on in Africa Coursera since March 15th, and 75% of them are accessing it through mobile technologies. So we're having to work with mobile providers for data access so we can be able to make that limited in an area that's a poor country. But working with the Commonwealth Education, we did a framework agreement that allows and supports Rwanda, Ethiopia, areas where there's not the same economic stature, but the growth potential for small business to become global. And Google's doing the same thing, as are the others. Google's placed innovation hub inside of Ghana. Ghana's just discovered oil. There's going to be advancements inside that world. And to Sunil's point about who to track and with machine learning AI, it's only been technology, travel, advertising, Facebook and tech companies like Google, et cetera, that have really brought into production machine learning AI. There's still transport and logistics. We've got Siemens on there, health and ears, and the work what they're doing with precision medicine, the ability for automotive and the electronic car inside of our areas that we're dealing in Africa. How do they mine things? Big across collaboration is natural resource control and agriculture. So Wageningen and Groningen universities out of the Netherlands are focusing on the Internet of Things and sensors for hydroponics, for tracking soil data, for tracking water data and their crops using machine learning AI because it's too much data for an Excel spreadsheet. So every sector, when we say about 13 trillion possible by 2030 and new jobs available inside the sector, these are areas that are in proof of concept. It's going to be universities with research departments in partnership with some industries, innovation projects that are happening at the government level that will bring about better solutions and better management of resources to make things happen. And when you think about global issues, I was working with the University of Zambia, and they wanted 1,400 of their lecturers trained and access to our Coursera campus before they let it out to their students. We ran into issue because the 8th natural wonder, Victoria Falls, and what powered Zambia was a hydroelectric dam. They've had drought for 3 years. There's rolling blackouts. There's no electricity because the water's not there. So what's happening elsewhere in the world is impacting globally, and there's got to be solutions to really make that happen. But it's going to be small businesses, minds that are working across both universities as well as within different countries to build ecosystems that are small.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That was a that was a nice fulsome answer. Krishna, I'll need your help in unmuting folks who might want to ask questions directly. So Krishna,
I will do that. I will do that. There are a couple of people already have put in some comments. In the meantime, I want to think about those questions from Monica and Jao, Mendes, and all. If you can read them, you can read them, right? Sure.
So those were not sent. No,
okay,
I don't. Those weren't sent to all.
I will read them out. Okay, what I'll do is I'll go to Peter first, and then I'll read out the ones that were sent, texted,
Wonderful.
and
Thank you.
I will then, and you can just moderate the question answer session. So Peter, I'm going to unmute you for just for a little while here, and then I'm going to the other questions that have been coming in, and I'll take the liberty of reading them out for the panelists. Peter, come in. You want to unmute yourself, Peter? Oops. computer? Okay. It's working. Okay. I can read our question from while he's coming in. I'm going to read out this question from Monica. Okay. Monica Holly Collins. She says, universities, let's see, where you go? Is how will companies adapt in terms of recruitment, career progression, etc., as education increasingly evolving beyond more traditional degree programs towards alternative and complementary credentials?
I think that's a great question. I'll jump in there and say that I think that I'm going to jump back to your last question and say that one of the things that I'm not hearing about that I think that we all need to be mindful of, especially those of us in industry and that are serving the academic space, is the technical, career and technical and community college education. So one of the things that we really work to do at Siemens is make sure that full suite software that would be available at, for example, Boeing or Rolls-Royce, or big tier 1 research universities is the same software that they're able to use in technical colleges and career training programs. And as far as how companies can adapt to the changing kind of learning environment, I think there's a similar sort of an answer, and that there's room for a lot of different players in this learning space, and for learners to choose the outlet that's right for them in the moment then, and whether that's a community college early on in their learning career, or for example, an apprenticeship program in one of the European countries, or return to a university for a master's degree, a PhD, or some other sort of a micro credential or a certificate in their later career as they're reskilling or upskilling. I think that the key is really going to be flexibility. And Michael F. touched earlier on the importance of stackability and portability in these credentials. And I think that that's going to be key. I think that the mindset that there's going to be a way that this all kind of locks in and works, and that's going to be the thing, is kind of erroneous. I think that being flexible and meeting learners where they are, but having a framework in which to do that. So standardization for prior learning assessment, standardization for what a unit of learning looks like, and the ability for learners to take those with them where they go is really going to be the key that we're looking for.
Ishwar, I'll let you
Thank
take
you,
back because Christian has given you the text questions.
Right.
I think.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jennifer. I think there's a question from Anil Kumar, and that touches upon something that Sunil said, is the difference between education and skills. Education leads to some attributes and competencies, whereas skills are much more narrowly defined as to what somebody can do in specific circumstances. So the question really is that are we parsing these things too finely? What are the thoughts of the panel?
I mean, I can jump in and just say I think education, you're right, is more broad and needed, and yet, well, the U.S. has an issue that a lot of people can never afford to go to a university. In parts of the world, universities are free and there's more access to them, and yet there's a huge growing population that can't go to them or won't ever afford them. And so what do? It starts to maybe contribute to the haves and have-nots. And so how do you hire people without degrees? What stackable credentials do community colleges, Jennifer mentioned, provide, or skills that at least get you employable when you can't afford to go to a university? Now, if you can go to a university at a more professional level, that's great, because education provides you a really great foundation, say in engineering, perfect foundation for the future, learn how to learn, and then you can provide stackable credentials on top of it. But to be honest, we have to work at both levels. We've got to look at the professional level, ongoing credentials, and we've got to think about people who will never get to university who need to be employed, because at least in the US, there are 40 million of them who need to be reskilled to start to learn how they can get entry-level jobs more associated with some of the high-tech areas than what they were doing before COVID.
Thank you, Michael. We're running out of time, but there's one last question about leveraging the tremendous diversity of universities across the world. So it comes back to, you know, us in these forums, not just mentioning Stanford and Princeton and Michigan and so on, and the Googles and the IBMs, but, you know, most employment in the world is in SMEs, small and medium enterprises, which feed up actually into the Siemens and the Boeings and so on. If you didn't have that logistical supply chain, you know, the big guys would be in trouble. So there's a tremendous diversity in employers, and there's a tremendous diversity in universities across the world. So I think that last question is food for thought as to how we can leverage that diversity. Can we have a quick answer in just 1 minute? Because I've got to give it back to Krishna, and you know, he's going to be, I've known him for several years. He's one of my mentors. He's a role model, and I don't want to disappoint him because if I do, bad things will happen.
Keep going, Ishwar. There are a couple of other good questions. Keep going. We have time.
I would love to answer that really quickly. In Africa, one of the I look after, but there's a Africa Association of Universities has got 56 centers of excellence. One of those, Michael Forrest, is tied into your world, which is Moi University, is a center of excellence on aeronautics. So there are work that we are doing with Coursera, funding with support funding from the World Economic Forum to be enabling those centers of excellence on Cape Coast for environmental studies and how that works. Working with these centers to make sure that they can be able to have access to undeveloped economic areas, high quality content, and create the leaders and the mission people of the future. So there's actively work being done across those centers.
Let me refocus the question. You know, Kirsten, we all know Kirsten, right? She runs Petrus. She's a small employer. She employs about 20 people. How does she win from this kind of a discussion and from the skills that we're talking about that might be credentialed by Coursera or, you know, over LinkedIn? How does it make Kirsten's life easier, and how does it make her a better employer?
Is that for me to answer? If it is, very simply put, you brought up small, medium-sized businesses. So specifically, there's entrepreneurialism and some general soft skills that are really helpful. I would have to speak to my areas, which is working with Ashishi's Ghana's Innovation Center for Climate Change. And they're working to develop 150 developing small businesses in Ghana using the Coursera Goldman Sachs Business Growth Plan structure. So 10 courses with a lecture from Syed, I'm going to name drop, but it's reality. There's a lecture from Oxford, a lecture from Wharton, a lecture from Leeds and Babington. But they're working to go from a concept all the way to a practical small business. What do you need to have across every sector so you can make a small business successful? And then working for, so I would say Kristen should take a look at some of the entrepreneur courses, some of the Facebook digital marketing courses so she can understand digital marketing, some basic specializations that will reskill her to be able to work collaboration and make use of the LinkedIn and other technologies to get to future customers and also build the bridges across. And similar to that, we're working with GROW and the Hewlett Packard Foundation and Bill and Gates Foundation in Rwanda for developing new people, as well as we work with OGTR across 12 universities to get people into employment in the oil and gas renewable energy sector. So all of those focus on advanced technology, small, medium-sized businesses that are going to feed into, in that case, renewable energy instead of a big corporate complex, fossil fuel complex.
Thanks, Michael. That was you know, Kristen's been a good friend, and so this is so this has been a great conversation. Back to you, Krishna.
Okay, thank you, Ishwar. Been fantastic. I mean, this is really a great opportunity, great discussion. In fact, I just want to add 30 seconds here and hand it to my friend Han Fire to wrap it up on behalf of IFES and GEDC. I work with about 50 engineering colleges in India, and they're doing a great job. Many of them are not the IITs or the Stanfords or the MITs, but they all got pretty good faculty and some really good students. And recently I found that there's been some arrangement by a group in India that to work with Coursera, and they call themselves L4G or something like that. And the point that earlier came up about curating the content. I think there's some faculty in these colleges that would be more than happy to help curate some of this content in your Coursera or other platforms that can be fit into a curriculum of these colleges directly. Okay, those kinds of things can be done. I just want to leave it there and let Hans take it from here.
Many thanks, Krishna. Can you hear me, Krishna?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
Thanks very much. It's been quite an inspiring, and particularly working with my brother and dear friend Ishwar, who loves and does it effectively, raises very controversial and effective questions that got the vibes and the enthusiasm going. Ishwar, you are consistent. I love you for it. We all value it, per se, and I think our Jennifer, the partnership that IFES, GEDC, IUC has had with Siemens for years, we deeply value. And I personally, on behalf of the other elected leaders of our organization, I really appreciate your thoughtful comments. Michael Forrest, of course, we work very closely, he and I, on some other contents. And Michael O'Neill, from my perspective, you've handled my troublemaking brother, Ishwan, very beautifully. And I will join you. I don't like beer, I like wine, and I hope all of us can come to a wine. There's a lot I could say. Of course, my dear friend and colleague Sunil, our incoming GEDC chair, is part of this discussion. Of course, he and I work very, very closely. I'm very happy, and I thank Kirsten very much and our friendship and partnership with Petrus for facilitating this conversation, Michael, with you. I've known Coursera, obviously, of deep respect, but I love Ishwar's questions. And in terms of the way you responded in terms of Africa, I spent 24/7 with 6 continents almost on a daily basis. So we don't just work with US, Canadian, or top German companies or British per se, or universities, but with all the world. And we have our meeting with Kirsten today at 11. I'm looking forward to explore a partnership with Coursera, IFES, GEDC, for you to become engaged. I want you to give presentations. For example, I'm in discussions with forming a new Brazilian Dean's Council. Having lived there, worked there, you mentioned Latin America, Africa. As Sunil knows, we have a very interesting, evolving African Dean's Council, per se. We have an evolving Indian Dean's Council. There are spaces, in addition to our global, for example, that I'm just excited to build on. Obviously, my friendship with Boeing and with Siemens, and to introduce you to our community. I look forward in this conversation 2 or 2.5 hours from now. Thank you very, very much on behalf of both the IUC, IFES, and GEDC community. This has been one of the really most thoughtful webinars, and we've recorded and shared with the global community. Thank you, my brothers and sister Jennifer, very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Peace be with you, and stay healthy above all, everybody, please.
Thanks, colleagues. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.